These are the principles I followed to get a perfect academic record. If you're new to my channel, my name's Francis. I'm a doctorate student in clinical psychology at Oxford University. Over the course of my life, I've ended up with low self-esteem, but also a good academic record. At GCSE, I got 12 A stars. At A-level, I got 4 A stars. In undergrad at Cambridge, I got a first. I got a first in every year. And in my master's at UCL, which I've just finished, I've been on track for a distinction, pending the results of my dissertation, which I've actually just got back now. So let's open them. Oh, this is awful. This is awful. Why am I doing this? Why am I recording this? Okay. In a master's, 50 is a pass, 60 is a merit, and 70 is a distinction. So anything above 70 is ideal. Just going to open it. Okay, we'll take those. Oh, we take those. Oh, I can still make this video. Okay, let's begin. The first half of this video is about concentration and motivation because that is most of the battle. And the second half is about the practicalities of studying once you get down to it. The first principle of my motivation is the panic calendar. I found that when it comes to work, I'm at my best when motivated by fear. There's nothing like a deadline the following day to generate that to motivate you to work. Given this, I've thought if I can create that sense of threat and fear earlier, I could switch into a productive mode with more time to spare between me and a deadline or exam. That is where the panic calendar comes in. I got this idea from the blog Wait But Why, where the author Tim Urban wrote an article called Your Life in Weeks. This set of boxes shows the amount of weeks you get in a 90-year life. And it's like, is that it, bro? We're gonna die soon. Existential crisis aside, I came away thinking, there's no time to lose. And the panic calendar is like a condensed version of this. I open a Word document and draw boxes between today's date and the dates of my exams. The exams go in a darker color, just so I know when they are. I print this off, put it on my wall. I don't write anything that I need to do on this calendar. It is entirely there to cross out a box every day and stoke that fear within me. And with that fear, the idea is that the practicalities work out themselves. More on that later. Overall, my philosophy has become one where I try and bend with the wind, accepting my sources of motivation being probably a bit unhealthy. It'd be healthier if I was motivated by reward rather than fear of punishment or ridicule or embarrassment. But this is just who I am. So that is one way to work with it. The second is brown and pink noise. I find that studying in silence, it's quite hard to get into the zone of working. I've tried to apply at least some of what I've learned studying psychology for the past 5 years, which is conditioning, just the idea that you can associate a particular sound, sight, smell with a certain activity, then being given that sensory input will kind of wire your brain into the mode for the activity you've linked it with. Does that make sense? I feel like it doesn't, but we're going to move on because it's 2 a.m. Basically for studying, I think conditioning should be about finding a particular location, if that's a library, sound or sight that you just associate with studying. And whenever you are there or are listening to it, your brain kind of knows that it's time to sit down and work. I'm aware not everyone has access to a library, but I would hope if you're watching this video, you have access to the internet. I found that if I listen to music with lyrics, then I just concentrate on the lyrics instead of the studying. And I've also tried instrumental music, lo-fi beats being a particular go-to of mine. But I think I've actually worked at my best when I used this site back in the day called Noisely. It's basically a collection of a range of different nature sounds. You can kind of layer these on top of each other, like rain, wind, fire, and then a kind of coffee shop ambience. It's really relaxing. This worked pretty well for me. But what worked the best was actually to use these sounds down here, which are white noise, pink noise, and brown noise. The colors basically just denote different frequencies of sound. This is white noise. This is pink noise. And this is brown noise. Beautiful tunes. My favorite, which is brown noise, is the integral of white noise. I don't know why that matters, but basically I just think it sounds really nice. I put headphones on and I'm just immersed in this kind of like static. It really drowns out surrounding noise, but also I can't really describe it. It makes my brain feel quieter. You're never going to encounter that sound in other areas of your life. So it can be entirely associated with your studying mode. Even now I hear it and part of my brain is like, oh, it's time to study now. So find a sound that works for you, whatever it may be, and stick with it so you can create a link in your brain. Motivation tip number 3, dealing with distraction. Distraction is inevitable. We get tempted to go on Netflix or to pick up our phone and go on social media. Most of us will always have this urge, even just a little bit. So my advice, once again, is to work with this. Accept who you are. Stop striving to be someone who does not get distracted at all. Firstly, when it comes to your phone, I find that if I leave my phone on my desk or even in a drawer in my desk, then whenever I get the urge to go on my phone, because it's in arm's reach, I'm just like, go on then. Whereas if I put my phone on the other side of the house or in the shed, then I get the urge to go on my phone, but it's far enough away that I can't be bothered to follow the urge and go and get it. An even better alternative, if you live with other people, is to give your phone to one of them and ask them to hide it for you. And that way, the barrier between you and your phone is going to find them and persuading them that actually you do need your phone and you're totally not just asking for it because you want to distract yourself from the work you actually need to do. But what about your computer? Because revising on the computer, you could just open a new tab on Chrome and type in any distracting website you want. And that is where the program called Turkey Blocker comes in. It's got a free version with all the features you need. The premise is that it can block distracting websites for you. But unlike most website blockers, for example, if you get a Chrome extension, these normal blocking extensions are equivalent to just leaving your phone in your drawer. Because if you want to get around these blocks, you can just open another browser or uninstall the extension. I was told about Cold Turkey Blocker while I was at Cambridge, and 4 years later, I still use it. You download the program, it gets you to install the extension on all your browsers. You block a website in cold turkey for a certain amount of time. What happens? You can't access it in any browser because it's gotten you to install it in every single one. If you exit cold turkey in Task Manager, it still works somehow. And then if you uninstall cold turkey while you've got an active block, it just won't let you. Basically, Cold Turkey Blocker is equivalent to putting your phone in a waterproof bag and chucking it in your nearest lake / river / geographical water feature. So with these 3 components, you can tame your monkey mind to get into work mode. But what do you actually do once you are in work mode? Now on to the second half of the video, which is about the practicalities of studying. My first tip is to turn studying into a video game. The way I studied at first was to write out my notes, write them out again, a bit more condensed, write them out again, more condensed, and so on until I had a very condensed sheet of notes. Then I'd highlight whatever I thought was important. This kind of worked. I remembered a decent amount of content. For some exams, I was just sat there thinking I've completely forgotten my notes. The idea behind turning studying into a video game is that we don't want to leave this memorization up to chance. You can create essentially a video game, a systematic way of memorizing everything. The scientific evidence about memorization shows that rather than copying out notes and highlighting, you are much better off doing active recall. Every time you sit down to study, you need to test whether you can recall the information because this is the muscle that you exercise in an exam after all. But you don't want to just do this recall at random. The way memory works is that it declines exponentially. So for a given fact that you've just learned, it might fall out of your memory after a couple hours or even a few minutes. If you do a successful recall before this happens, the memory might stick in your brain for a bit longer, say a day. If you do it again a day later, then it will stick in your brain for a week. Over time, you can embed a fact into your long-term memory by leaving increasingly large gaps between your recalls. And that is how this graph, the forgetting curve, works. Starting from A levels, where I first learned about this program, I began to use Anki. Anki is a free flashcard program that lets you create flashcards and then go through them in the way that's optimal for your memory. So using this forgetting curve. For any new flashcard, you'll try and remember what's on the other side. You'll do that again after about 10 minutes. Then your next review will be in a day, then 3 days, then a week, then 2 weeks, and so on until the flashcard is so embedded in your long-term memory that your next review will say it's in like 1.5 years time and you'll be recalling the card like you can recall your own name. The best thing about Anki is that because of its scheduling algorithm, no matter how many cards you make, it'll be just as easy to remember them. Whether that's 500, 1,000 or multiple thousand cards, you can actually learn them as well as if you just learned 10. And when you see that it does work when it comes to your next little test or exam, you'll just feel so much confidence making new cards, knowing that you can't remember this right now, but by making the card, you're essentially committing it to your long-term memory eventually, which is what makes it feel like a video game for me, just seeing the number of flashcards you have to do every day go down. In the run-up to exams, I do my Anki cards every day religiously for hours a day. And then when you're doing the exam, instead of trying to remember the notes you condensed and highlighted, you're actually just doing more of the same thing, like recalling flashcards that are prompted by the questions you're asked in the exam. I'd do this to remember short answers, but also long answers where I'd memorized essays by breaking them down into flashcards. I genuinely think this made some of my exams enjoyable because it just turned it into a flashcard recalling game rather than using actual intellect and thinking on your feet. The second principle is that the work has already been done before. This advice applies to coursework assignments and forms of work where you need to show evidence of, say, original thinking to get good marks. What I've learned is for most academic qualifications, maybe excluding PhD level, you don't really need to come up with something original and groundbreaking to change the game, change the field you are working in, because so many people have been in your position doing A-levels or undergrad or even master's degrees. They've seen everything before, and it's very rare that you'll come up with something brand new. I realized in Cambridge undergrad, they just recycled the same essay questions year after year, probably even longer than academic specifications for GCSEs and A-levels stay the same. So you can get advice from people who have done the same course as you and literally answered the same questions even 10 years ago. More on that shortly. In terms of standing out and trying to distinguish yourself to get better marks at uni, one way is by critiquing studies. If you're like me, you won't be able to understand most of the academic papers you read. And it's like, if I can't understand it, how on earth am I going to criticize it? There are two cheeky ways I've found to critique studies. The first is that every study has a limitations section where the author or authors highlight the shortcomings of their study, and I would just lift those and put them in my essays as critiques of that study. You can also draw inspiration from the future directions section of these papers where the authors speculate where the research might benefit from going in the future. By including future directions in your essays, you can show that you're aware of the holes in the studies that exist already and where the field might be advancing in the future. The second way of critiquing studies is to use Google Scholar and find other papers that have cited the paper you're reading, and there's a chance that some of them will have written critiques of your paper, and so you can even cite them in your essay, which shows that your critiques are actually backed by these people, even though that's where you got them from. And that brings me on to the second way of showing originality, which is by doing wider reading and going beyond your reading list. If you follow this trail of finding papers that cite papers in your reading list, you can pretty quickly create an impression that you've done a very wide and extensive reading of the literature. On Google Scholar, you can also refine your search by date of publication. So if you limit your search to the last 5 years, then you'll only see papers that are the most modern, that will have probably reviewed much of the literature already, and so you can claim that you have an understanding of the literature in its latest form, therefore basically completing science. These principles took me fairly far, but what really helped me was to get advice from people one step ahead of me. These would be people 1 or 2 years above me, or even people in my year who have done a given assignment. I found that these are actually the best kinds of people to get advice from in general, because if you ask, say, a lecturer or just someone much older than you who's got loads of experience, they can know all there is to know about your subject, but they almost know too much because over time, a lot of their skills have become unconscious competence, like knowing how to ride a bike. People who are one step ahead of you may have less expertise than older people with loads of experience, but they still remember what it was like to be you and are still in touch with that. I've actually found their advice to be more effective. Of course, I'm here to give my generic advice, but if you combine this with people who have much more specific advice for you 1 or 2 years above you, for example, then I really think you're on to a winning combo. If you want a further helping hand with specifically learning STEM subjects, then you should check out Brilliant, the sponsor of today's video. Brilliant is a website offering a number of online courses in maths, science, and computer science. From trying it myself, I love how Brilliant constantly keeps me focused through hands-on activities like literally testing code within a lesson, which also helps me to remember what I've learned. There are so many courses to choose from that can help anyone brush up on their STEM knowledge. Perhaps you're looking for a foundational understanding of algorithms or calculus, or you might want to dip your toes into more advanced content like the introduction to neural networks. Across the site, they have thousands of lessons with new exclusive content added every month. Learning just a little every day can have a massive impact. To get started for free, visit brilliant.org/FrancisMadden or click the link in the description, where you will also get 20% off an annual premium membership. The final principle I followed is the magic pill. I wish there was a magic pill for studying, and there isn't one, but maybe the closest thing I've found to a magic pill for studying is this. I've been taking fish oil since I was about 10. I've never been off it since I started, so technically I don't actually know whether it's responsible for anything in my life. I've read a lot of good things about it, nonetheless. Fish oil supplements contain omega-3 fatty acids called EPA and DHA, both of which are very present in the human brain, but cannot be created by human cells, which is why it's very important to consume a healthy amount of fish, or just take a supplement if you don't like fish. The scientific literature has linked EPA and DHA levels to improved cognitive development as well as neuroprotective effects over the lifespan. So don't take this as medical advice whatsoever. Like, I do psychology, I'm not a scientist, but I've just found that fish oil is something that I've taken over this time frame across which I've been decently successful. Make of that what you will. A final thing to round up this video is I want to comment on how perfection is a lie, and perfectionism, seeking perfection, can be quite toxic. Despite the title and thumbnail of this video, my academic record is not technically perfect. I got a C in general studies, I got a D in further pure maths of my A-level, and I got like 50% in an assignment on my master's about planning clinical interventions. So you don't actually need to be perfect in order to look perfect. I don't even think a perfect academic record is something you should aim for either. The relationship between work and output is in grades. You get diminishing returns over time. So to go from like 50 to 60% might take a certain amount of work, but to go from 90 to 100% is basically an obscene amount of work in comparison. The time you could spend creating absolute academic perfection is 100% better off spent going outside, touching grass, and making friends, because that is what you will look back on when you look back on your school days and your uni days. Why do we seek a perfect academic record in the first place? Is it so that we can finally get our parents' validation, approval, and love? It can feel like we need to meet certain conditions in order to receive those. But as a general concept, we want the perfect academic record so we can have a greater chance of success and happiness in life. That is why it is worth spending time finding happiness more directly by finding people you enjoy spending time with. So bear that in mind while trying to get a perfect academic record. Don't lose sight of the more important things in life. Thanks again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Stay tuned if you're interested in more vids about my academic journey so far, like this vlog of UCL, and I'll see you very soon with another video.